Good morning, Enara.
Good morning. How are you
How are
doing?
you?
Wonderful.
So they told me that you are going to run this panel. The panel is about tech tools for the future of fashion. You're going to have some hosts, Mauro Mastronicola. Ciao Mauro, I know him.
Ciao.
Once we met on, I think on Zoom or something. Chengxi Wang, I hope to pronounce it well, and Joanna Lacerda. So if it's okay for you, I give you the stage and I'll be back in 30 minutes, something like that, okay?
Sounds good.
See you later.
Take care. Hello, Mauro.
Hi, everyone.
Ciao to all.
So great that we were able to find each other.
Finally.
Yes,
I
we
was a
did.
bit lost.
That's all right. We're meandered the labyrinth of the digital rooms. But I'm so excited to get to this conversation with you. We're honestly living at such an incredibly transformative time. A year ago, if you think of the conversations about digital fashion, wearable tech, smart textiles, or even the metaverse at large, it was really niche and happening amongst small groups of people. But with all of the publicity around NFTs, 3D printing, and fashion tech in general, I think everyone is thinking about the next evolution of the internet and how it's going to impact their industries. So our objective today is to share some of the thinking behind the emerging tech tools and the impact that they'll actually have on the fashion industry at large. So we'll get to learn from you as speakers today. Mauro Mastronicola is the founder of Twin One, a tech company that creates realistic digital twins for any product. And we're also joined by Chengxi, who is the CEO of Satori, which is a London-based company specializing in 3D printing services for professionals of any background and innovators around the world. So first, I'd love to get started by acknowledging that after every distressing time, there's always a renaissance. And the world is, of course, no longer the same. Retail and commerce is definitely not the same. And I think if we think of the consumer, they have transformed as well. And the endurance of these global changes reinforced and also opened up new themes and conversations around collective and individual freedom, sustainability, ownership, social responsibility. And I'd love to see if you've been seeing similar themes emerge in your work as well. So let's get started by getting to know each of your personal domains. Chengxi, the use of 3D printing in fashion, I think, has finally reached a point where it's becoming normal. I always think of Iris van Herpen and Anouk Ruprecht and their 3D otherworldly printed garments. And a lot of these tech tools, I think, when it comes to specifically 3D printing or software, has been adapted from other industries, whether it's architecture, aviation, engineering, and I think those tools are rarely made for creatives. So what is the current status of 3D tech tools for the fashion industry? How accessible are they, and what are the applications?
Yeah, sure. So for 3D printing application in the fashion, if you see in the market, that can be roughly divided into two areas. One is for smaller accessories. We're talking about jewelry, rings, and the other is about the clothing. And for the rings, actually, most of people are using 3D printed accessories. They just do not know. So 3D printed jewelry has been widely used in the jewelry making process now. So what we do is it's a predominantly replacing the traditional method of the investment casting. So in the past, you have to manually produce those castable ring, but now it can be all 3D printed with a wax component in it that will really streamline this process, especially for the application, the wedding ring. And if you want to quickly allow the couple to try the ring, especially in COVID time, you cannot go to a store, then the manufacturer, they can send you this 3D printed ring. You can try it on, see if you like the shape on your fingers and whether the size fits. So that's one application for accessories. But on the other end is about those garment, the clothing, and the fabric that requires a different technology for 3D printing. But for Satori, we actually stand in between. We're not the traditional 3D printing that use the will interfere into the investment casting process, nor are we printing those large garments. What we do is that we're rethinking. For a long time, 3D printing has been seen as an intermediate process. It facilitates the manufacturing, but can we produce the end product? So by saying that if you 3D print a ring or earrings, it's not an intermediate process. People can actually wear it And to facilitate that process, you have to have a great material. The material range, the color, and the finish has to be aesthetically beautiful. And on the other end is the creativity of the designer, which that's why I'm really interested in event like this, because it's not a one-way street. It's not about the technology. It's about technology in communication with the creative people, with the designer. So last year, during COVID, we have the collaboration with the designer Gannett. So she was able to produce those fully 3D printing necklace, and we printed it out within 7 hours. And the necklace itself has this crystal finish, can be used as end product. And we also move it further to embed LED light inside this necklace that can produce different color based on the Wi-Fi controller in your phone. So that's our attempt to go beyond what can be done currently in 3D printing to encourage people to imagine more, to be more creative. So in a nutshell, the current status for 3D printing is that we're moving from this intermediate manufacturing process to the final stage where 3D printing product can be the end use, and also to encourage people to have more creativity.
Oh, wow, that is so exciting to hear that instead of it just being something that's being created as a prototype can actually become the end product. And I think creating jewelry also takes a lot of fine details. So I see how like everything that we learned from that sector can be very applicable in the next iteration of this. Mauro, we'll have to ask you, what is a digital twin? How does it work? And why is this an important innovation for the fashion industry to adapt?
Okay, thanks for the question. The digital twin is a perfect replication of an item. What we mean for digital twin is creating the shape and creating the collection of textures, garments that you can use with that twin. In this way, and having this 3D virtual copy, virtual replica on a real-time engine technology, that is something that came from gaming and doesn't require rendering time. You can manipulate, creatives, pattern makers can manipulate the twin to create the final collection, to create the variations, avoiding prototyping or sampling, or a large amount of sampling and prototype. So our concept of digitizing a collection moves between the replication of the item, the scanning or the recreation of the texture, a software system that allows you to manipulate instantly that virtual copy. And that's why we love to call this path instant creativity, because it's the opportunity to give to the final creator a digital realism that can be manipulated in a virtual environment. And this is crucial to avoid tons of wastes in general. What our objective is to suggest people that this is a real sustainable process, because it can be applied from the prototyping phase to the creation of the last of the marketing assets you need from that twin. This is something we did, for example, for Bacon months ago. Probably it's the end-to-end perfect process, because we supported the fashion designer in the creation while he was just sketching his idea, and then we moved to the collection development, and we create lots of variations for that item that during the sales the selling team uses to present the collection in that strange period that was the COVID, when showrooms were closed. We create even AR assets to be sent to the final customer. And in the end, reusing that twin, we created marketing campaign, and then we put the avatars on the catwalk. It was the first time that Bacon clothing brand in 10 years was on the runway. It was the first time. So in the end, the process can be 360 degrees. It can be really sustainable in this way.
Amazing. I think when we think about the technology that you both described, both on the 3D printing side and the digital twin side, I think there's different images that can come to mind for a person thinking about the technology. If they think of 3D printing, they could imagine this big machine that's going kind of like back and forth by the line and like printing something that might be made of plastic, for example, which, you know, you kind of try to see how that can become applicable to fashion. Or maybe with digital twins, it's an avatar, like, is it accurate? Is it true to life? So what are some of the common misconceptions that fashion professionals may encounter about your technology, and why interdisciplinary innovation between fashion and tech is actually important? Chengxi, let's start with you.
Sure. So one big misconception, I think, is first, like you mentioned, 3D printing is plastic. It can be rigid. And also, it's a very cold machine. And fashion normally is known for emotion, for personality. But I think the reason why people misunderstand it that way is, for a long time, 3D printing or technology in general, it has been detached from the human aspect. But the importance of the technology is have to have a close interaction with human being, and to see how this technology can be utilized to empower what we really have inside us, the creativity, emotion. And one example was, so recently we have the collaboration with the fashion designer who graduated from Central Martin in London, and her name is Siobhan, and she has a very big passion about exploring her personal identity, and in particular it's about the DNA and who we are. And the way that she perceived about personal identity was also embedded into her jewelry design. So different from traditional jewelry design, like you mentioned, it's very small, detailed. She goes with the full scale, with a very big object. So for the necklace, it's made of over 12 interconnected chains, and it will be probably this long. And the creation she had was 3D printed in one piece, in one go. So what it disrupted people's understanding about 3D printing is 3D printing can print interconnected, articulate objects. So it's not necessarily rigid. It can be very flexible. And the second part is 3D printing is not a replacement tool of traditional manufacturing, and can empower more creativity. And in this case, 3D printing helps the designer to tell the story of her personal identity. The chain represents the DNA structure, and each connection, it almost like one part of the story in her life. And when we produce that as an initial draft product, and she can hold it, and when you see your actual design coming to life, it's almost like seeing your baby coming to the earth. Even it's at the very initial stage. That is the power of 3D printing that the people didn't recognize, is that it's not about the ending. It's not about what you see. It's about the whole journey that you can tangibly shape, explore. And it's almost like two forces. One is you as a human being. The other is about the machine. And you talk to each other, you elevate each other, which actually reminds me of the fashion show of Alexander McQueen in the early 2000s. He put a robot in the catwalk stage, and then there was a model. She wear I think it's a yellow dress, and then they start to dance together with the robot, and the robot inject the ink on the dress, and that becomes a dance between the technology and a human being. It has been decades since he debuted that catwalk, that fashion show. But I think the essence is still there. Like today, we're talking about technology and fashion. For us, it's a huge responsibility to break the silo, to increase interaction, and see how human beings can be empowered to release more creativity in this process.
I love the way that you're describing tech as almost an amplifier of human creativity, where you're able to turn to this tool to leverage it, to be able to communicate something you won't normally be able to communicate either as quickly or maybe as with specific complexity. And I'm seeing a lot of similarity between both your technology and Mauro's, how you're appealing to the designer to be able to embrace a very different process. And I think for someone who may be traditionally trained, when it comes to designs that are made entirely with software, they may be a little bit of distrust if it's going to look exactly the way you want to. So Mauro, how do you help designers step into the digital space, especially if they are traditionally trained, and leverage your tools to create the designs?
In the end, what our clients really appreciate is the realism of the final item, and this closes the gap between the fact that it's virtual and it's not real. But on the other hand, what we are trying to do is push the clients to understand this concept. If they, first of all, create their virtual version of the things, and this is something very crucial in the fashion world, because the numbers of items and SKU a brand can produce, it's massive. So to close the gap between the opportunity of the digitization and whatever can happen after the design phase, we need a massive adoption for the brands to design by their own with digital instruments. Clients understand what's the opportunity around this, but we all know that the chain to create that item is in some way stuck in 100 or more years of practice. So to close this gap, we are creating software tools together with the fact that we can support a brand from the end to the beginning of their creative phase. We are creating tools that are super easy to use, that are the ease of use is fun as playing a video game. But if you can prototype with a video game your collection, if you can shot in a virtual environment images as well as videos, probably we are doing the right effort to stimulate the other part of the industry to adopt in a massive way a virtual version of the value chain, of the entire value chain. We can affect medium and small brands directly, but when it comes to talk to the most important firm in this world, we need to wait for their adoption of the 3D version of the pattern making, for example. Obviously, these strange times that we are all living accelerate a lot the comprehension, the understandings, the interests between these topics. So we are here, and we think that we can get the most of this path when we all, as an industry, will move in this direction together.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I mean, I think what you just said is so important, is that we are having this conversation because a lot of this technology is still not part of most fashion companies' design processes, that there's room for innovation. And when we look towards the future, I think something that I always think of is that what got you here won't get you there. There's so many things that are changing, and you have to, as a company, as a designer, to develop an appetite and a stomach for innovation. So to me, innovation is a healthy relationship with risk. And when people hear of the words like digital twins or 3D printing, they might not know where to even begin. And I think that this comes with also a shift in the population of the future consumer. Digital natives, people who have grown up with the internet, are growing in their power to also have a spending power, and they want different things from their products. So how can companies and fashion professionals reach this growing base of digital native consumers using your tools and your products?
You are right. In some way, probably another path of acceleration of this adoption is the fact that the virtual version of the things on that targets is leveraging the interests around these kind of technologies, and you need to have your virtual blockchain, the NFTs, copy of a product, because people will ask for this.
Yeah, I definitely think it is becoming also not only just a tool that you can leverage, but also the consumer is finally ready to receive the products that you can create. Chengxi, are you seeing something similar within your business as well?
I think for the consumer side, like what was experienced by all of us is the education component. Like, how can we make people realize this is not intimidating tool? And that's beyond just a particular technology. I think it requires a paradigm shift, which means that I think since the Industrial Revolution, we changed how we perceive technology. We thought technology is a replacement of a human labor. So if you can do it faster and more efficient, let the machine do it, and then human beings walk away. And even today, we have so many tech products in the market, but what we want from the tech product is, can we be lazier? Can this tech product do something for us? And we're consumer in most of the cases. But what we want to say, you mentioned in the very beginning, it's a renaissance. And what's the core spirit of Renaissance is that we bring the core virtue of the human being life. And what is that? It's a creativity. And in this stage, how can we make people realize the full potential of technology is that shift the power from technology to human beings. And we have the tool, like for our panel discussion, we're talking about the tool. Indeed, it's just a tool. Although I'm running a 3D printing company, but I still don't want people to see 3D printer would do everything for you. What we need is to let people release their creativity. It sounds easier than a reality, because when we discuss with the potential customers or even our friends around, our first question normally is, if you have the 3D printer, what would you like to print? So we give them tremendous freedom now. All of a sudden, they don't know what to do. And they try and struggle really hard to find something that's already existing in the market or around them. But that's not how creativity works. If you look at before the Industrial Revolution, we have so many inventors, so many creative people who dare to see beyond what's existing. And that's exactly what we want people to see with the digital or the 3D printing tool. Is it's just a tool. And now we want to move you towards the phase where you are empowered to see the possible beyond what people think is impossible. And then people will become more and more interested. Otherwise, they will think, oh, that's just another tool come to market. What can the tool do for you? And if you're waiting for the tool to do something for you, you're always passive. You always very concerned about this power game that the technology someday might control you. So I think overall, it's not about the education specific functionality, and it's about the mindset change. People have to take control of the creativity.
I love that. I love that perspective when you're saying essentially this is something that is going to be a learning experience, but it does take a personal input and experimentation to find the way you would like to actually leverage it. It's almost like a blank canvas. And as we're approaching the end of our conversation, and I think what's really important is that as important as it is to make data-driven decisions and be able to use that to inform your business, I think a leader's intuition is often very telling of what's going to come forward in the future. And everything we talked about today sounds incredibly exciting, but I'm sure that this technological shift will change our cultural narrative and our companies in ways that we can't even imagine yet. So like you mentioned, technology is a tool, and just like fire is a tool, it can empower our world, it can also burn it down. And I would love to get to hear, what is your intuitive, maybe a half crazy prediction about the next 5 years in your specific industry? Chengxi, let's start with you and then we'll move over to Mauro.
Sure. So what I vision for this industry is going to be an ecosystem. So you do not see 3D printing as either 3D printer or material. It's a whole ecosystem. And that will also integrate into the software part, like we have those virtual reality and some 3D modeling. And that's going to be a streamlined process. Maybe now people just see the digital twin and 3D printing in silo, but in the future, it's a whole ecosystem. And one conversation I had before, before COVID, it was a startup that specialized in the transaction of the video game weapons. So basically what they do is they break down the wall between different video games. If you buy this weapon in one video game, then you can with the help of blockchain to sell or buy the weapon in another game. And the founder at that time were in the event, and he approached me and saying that maybe one day we can collaborate. And for those video gamer, they would like to have a tangible feeling of their digital tool. So although there's some ambiguity about the legalization of 3D printing weapon, but in those cases, not the real weapon, it's the tool in the video game. But what we're trying to see is that we really start to see people working in the industry, they see the whole picture, that the 3D printing is not just 3D printing, it's connected with the whole ecosystem of a 3D design, digitalization. So in a nutshell, in the next 5 years, I wouldn't see people see 3D printing as a one technology. They will see it as a one player in the ecosystem that will make people's fashion or other industry more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I can totally see what you're describing, how the technology that Mauro is developing and what you're creating, they are communicating with each other, and there's so many opportunities to be able to collaborate. Mauro, I would love to hear your perspective of a 5-year
vision.
Yes,
I totally agree with that vision. The idea of an ecosystem of tools that leverage something will result in an explosion of creativity. Probably we will gain sustainability. And in the end, probably we will produce less and this will be true. I imagine that the made-to-order version of the things will really happen. The consumption of goods will be driven by the idea that I'm happy because I know that this project, this piece of cloth, of this accessory came from a beautiful mind in a sustainable way and arrived to me. I don't know in which way, but probably even the production, the supply chain will be affected by this path. So I hope for that renaissance led by creativity.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
incredible.
by individuals, yes. That's the point.
I love that. I love that it is something that we're almost having a sober view of how technology is almost inevitable. Like it's going to transform the business side of things with the way things are supplied, how it's able to cut costs. If you're able to manufacture things on demand, it can cut waste. So instead of talking about sustainability, we can now turn to these tools and say, okay, how can we begin incorporating them into our practices so that we can actually meet these goals that we're set for ourselves? Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I think helping us expand also our collective imagination to ask better questions and also to see connections where we once may have seen boundaries or barriers to entry, where a creative might not see themselves as a technologist, but now with these tools that they can. So thank you so much for the work that you do in this space as well. I'm so excited to follow what you do next. And if you enjoyed this talk, please give our panelists a follow on LinkedIn to stay in touch with their developments. And Mauro, Chengxi, it's been a pleasure. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'll see you, I'm sure, in the next room.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
See you around.
Thank you.
Ciao, see you around. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
If you have a minute, we have a question from the audience. You have a minute? It's too late. I think it's too late. I don't hear you. I can't hear Enara and Mauro. I just can hear Chengxi. So okay, maybe we can just say thank you and goodbye. Okay, perfect.